Hi there, you're listening to Sooner Podcast, the podcast where you can chat with fascinating filmmakers about their lives, their work, and their favorite films on Sooner. Sooner is a European streaming platform based in Berlin, where you can find exclusive festival highlights and exciting cinema from new generation of filmmakers. Today, we are diving into the raw, rebellious world of Yony Leyser, a filmmaker who blurs the line between fiction and reality with a punk underground aesthetics. Known for his bold storytelling and his radical perspective, Leyser's films explore outsider identities, counterculture and subversion, blending documentary elements with narrative experimentation. From his deep dive into the life of William S. Burroughs to his electrifying portraits of queer and underculture communities in Berlin, Leyser works defines norms and gives a platform to alternative perspectives. Let's get into it.
Hi Yony, thanks for making this talk possible. I'm glad it worked out, and I'm happy to have you here.
I'm happy that you're happy that I'm here.
Sweet. So I'm gonna start quite classic.
Yeah.
And I'd like to tell me a little bit like how it turned up that you became a filmmaker at the end.
Well, I guess it was a long time ago, actually. I haven't been asked that question in a really long time. I think when I was a teenager, the world was a different place. I think today, young people that want to connect with others and spread a message become content creators or get involved with social media. But when I was 16, I had a really hard time as a teenager. I knew I was different. I knew I was weird. Growing up queer, kid of an immigrant, single mom in the suburbs of very conformist middle America, I didn't see myself represented anywhere around, and I kind of wanted to be political and artistic. And so my outlet was first theater, and I got into a magnet school for theater. And then I met the media arts kids who were like film and writing, and they were much cooler than the theater kids because the theater kids were just dramatic. So I started hanging out with them and became friends with one of them, and we started shooting little films. And I thought, wow, it's actually really fun to be behind the camera and to tell these stories. And we were shooting kind of like little documentaries, and already then around 16, 17. And I just found it a very powerful medium because you could incorporate photography, writing, acting, documentary. It's not like theater where it goes away after the night. It's not temporal. So, that's how it all started. And when I went to high school with she became quite a famous comic actress called Cecily Strong. She was on Saturday Night Live for a long time, and she was like, hey, there's this great film school I'm going to in Los Angeles. You guys should go. She's like a year older. And so me and my best friend at the time, we went there and studied a year of film there. And we hated it because it was in the suburbs and really boring, and there was nothing to film about. And I eventually transferred, but that's how it all started.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought you had lived in New York because since you're, I don't know. I think is it your first film, the William Burroughs,
Yeah.
The Man Within?
Yeah.
So I thought you were a New Yorker somehow because of that.
Yeah. No, I started that film. I got asked to leave that school, Cal Arts, where I was at, because I made an art piece criticizing the dean of students for a racist incident, and I signed her name on this fake letter, and I blew it up and put it on the walls of an art opening. But it's illegal in the United States to sign someone else's name, even on a piece of art. So she threatened me, and I left the school. And I went to Lawrence, Kansas, where my sister was living, and that's where Burroughs lived. And so I started a documentary about him, and that's how that film came about.
Okay. I think I'm going to take this hook and talk about that film. So I watched recently the film, and it quite impressed me because I was someone that wasn't so familiar with the William Burroughs story. And for me, it was quite shocking to know that this person inspired so many people in the US and was a source of inspiration for so much art and other musicians. And so your first contact with them was back then when you were living there after film school then?
Yeah, I read Naked Lunch in high school, and I was just shocked in the 1950s that someone was writing about the demi-monde, the subcultures, queer. The first use of that word in that context is the book, William Burroughs' book, which now is a film from Luca Guadagnino. But the idea of him writing openly about homosexuality, he broke censorship, which was super interesting to me. But more so, he also wrote about using kind of one sexuality to be subversive, to subvert the mainstream, which was so progressive for the time. And, I think he, as I explained, show in the film, really struggled as a person. I mean, he shot his wife. He was deeply unhappy. He was, he was a deeply imperfect person. His work was groundbreaking, and we need more of that today, because today a lot of the kind of queer, now that LGBTQ plus people have been accepted, and now with a great backlash against them, but there was a lot of fitting in. And now that we have this fascism rising up around the world, the news of the United States every day, it's really important that we all stand our ground and fight for our rights, because things are getting dark.
Yeah, for the ones who doesn't know, we are sitting in Germany right now, and since after the elections in the US and also soon coming up elections in Germany, just a bit of context now for the listeners.
Yeah, Trump's been in office for 4 weeks.
So, I mean, one thing that struck me knowing that this was one of your first films, and one of the last scenes we see John Waters, the classic independent filmmaker from the US, talking about how Burroughs was actually became a role model for young artists that didn't know that it had a voice, as you say, you as a kid also had it was political and it was artistic, and he became a role model for many of those people that didn't fit in. And my first thought was since you directed and you produced it, we can see that you engage all of your energies in this project as your first one. So I was quite struck that the statement from John Waters was exactly what I saw the film being made about William Burroughs. So can you tell me a little bit more of your relationship with Burroughs and how
Which statement was it?
It's in the end of your film. John Waters said that he that art for a message for young artists that didn't fit in, that kind of how William Burroughs became a role model for them to be able to find their voices and break through, and I thought it was super interesting to see that, and I could see you as a young filmmaker also thinking the same and shooting the same film.
Yeah, no, I mean Burroughs and John Waters and a lot of those people, the punk figures in the film, are. I think it's important to have rebel role models. We're so afraid in today's society where everyone has a camera and stuff to say the wrong thing, or to either to get canceled or not be able to continue making our work because we're saying the wrong thing, and everybody's worried about their brand and what's my brand and all of these kind of conversations. And I think it's really important for an artist to just be rebellious and have rebel role models, because there's getting fewer and fewer nowadays. The ones that people see rebellious are these tech bros who are microdosing and going to the right and playing the rebel. They're playing rebellious people have fought against the status quo, and they're claiming to be fighting against the status quo in a right-wing way, and that's not what a rebel is. Rebel is someone who says no to the oppression, to kind of free up and make things more possible for subcultures. Yeah.
So lately, we're talking about rebels and inspiration for young artists, but lately, what's been inspiring you lately? On films that you watch, or is it films, or is it another kind of art? What's is moving you the last couple of the last time?
I still really like culture, and in Berlin, last 2 nights ago, I was at Gob Squad, this theater collective, and theater Florentina Holzinger, what she's doing, breaking the boundaries, and films. I mean, I think there were a lot of good films. I like Luca Guadagnino. I like what he's doing. I'm really glad that he did Queer. I don't think it was his best film, perfect film, but I really love his exploration of homoeroticism. I mean, I thought Challengers was really good. I thought Substance was really good. I think a lot of the stuff on the streaming platforms, we were talking yesterday about Rotting in the Sun, great film. And so I think all of those kind of films that use humor and have a political message and explore those kind of themes, I'm very inspired by. And I think there's a lot of great music obviously still coming out. And I hope that there's good art coming out. Good art comes out under fascism, so maybe it'll kick people in the butt.
Since you mentioned we are sitting in Germany, like, can you talk us in, like, how come this like that you moved from the US and came to Germany, and how was this period of your life? Like, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think like after the fall of the wall, for probably another 20, like from 1990, the fall of the wall, or the early 90s, until I would say 2015, Berlin was a place full of possibilities. People came here for the nightlife, for the arts, for the culture. Queer people from all around the world came here, especially queer artists, because of all the possibilities. It was really cheap. It's a really cheap city in a really rich country, poor city in a rich country. So you had all the benefits of being in a rich country and all the fun of being in a cheap city. It was like queer, and it was very punk, and there's a lot of demonstrations and very political. And for me, it seemed like heaven after living in New York. And I think some of the spirit is still there. Obviously, it's gotten muted quite a bit, but I think young people are still having fun and raving. But I think it's no longer a cheap city. It's no longer, I mean, when I came here, there were still squats. There was, apartments. They would pay you to move into them. It was, everybody was doing whatever they wanted without worrying about money, which was the only place I had been in the world like that. I mean, there were certain cities that you can go to that were in poor countries that you don't have the infrastructure. There was no way then to survive. But there was an infrastructure here. And I came with a passport. My grandparents were German Jews, Holocaust survivors, and so I had a passport before I came. So I was sick of the U.S., and I also saw the direction the U.S. was going in. I left even under Obama when things were not that bad, but I saw America going in that direction, and it was the best decision I made. And yeah.
So I've seen, like, lately your professional works, like you are kind of one of an artists, like a director that works a lot shooting documentaries and fiction film, and I really enjoy seeing how filmmakers that propose themselves should shoot both, and we can see like a little bit more of his or hers like approach to her work, like through this two different genres. And I would like to know a little bit how you transit from like shooting fiction and also documentary.
I mean, I think being working in film or being an artist or however you want to call it is exciting if you try new things. People like, again, with this kind of idea of brand, like you get all these instructions, like this is how you have to behave at the Berlinale. Introduce yourself, come with a friend, bring a requisite. I see these kind of posts. I'm just like, dude, just be yourself, talk to people, see what you're interested in. It's this professionalization of art, professionalization of film, where like develop your brand, develop your own personal style of filmmaking and stick to it. And it's like, how boring is that? I'd love to try new things. I love to always explore new territories. And I've done theater, I've written books, I've done documentaries, I've done reality, I've done fiction, I've done docufiction. I try to do a little bit of everything because it's more fun to me. It's more fun to explore things and try new things and not stick to this idea of a brand. I don't want to be a brand, I want to enjoy myself and challenge myself. That's what life's all about, and being authentic. Yeah. So I'm really lucky to have been able to do that under the cultural umbrellas that exist here in Germany. I never did any of my projects with a lot of money, I mean, TV maybe is the exception to that, but I always just kind of scraped by and like got the very minimum funding that I could, and did the most with it with my community, and that was the most fun way of doing things. And now that I'm an old man, I maybe do things with a little bit more money and more like Auftrag, like commissioned work, but it's also still fun for me.
And how you see the difference of the two industries, like the one that the film industry in North America and the ones here, like at least the German one, like how can you trace like a little bit of context of those two industries?
Well, German, I mean, the better work comes from other country. It has historically good. Documentaries are good in Germany, but fictional work comedy stuff like that, they don't really know how to do here. They still don't really know how to do that well, or it's not as good as, you know, France, England, US, and stuff like that. There's a lot of international directors doing interesting stuff here, and there are exceptions. There's some really fantastic German films that come out, but they're few and far between. Like, I really liked the Lehrerzimmer last year was really good, and I like The Ordinaries this year was really good. I think there's some exceptions, some really brilliant German cinema, Tony Erdmann, of course, and stuff. But I think it's few and far between because there's so many rules to making a film and so many people, checks and balances, and also people are not really at risk. I think a lot of great filmmakers come out of like this necessity of like, you know, survive, like, you know, sink or swim mentality. Here it's kind of like a safe middle class. There's always like safe middle class filmmakers, and so they're making safe middle class films, and some of them are maybe not as strong, but I'm really happy that that system exists here. It's struggling. I mean, the culture industry is getting chopped, but it was such a blessing, even if it doesn't continue, you know, it was such a blessing to have had it and worked under it, and seen so many of my peers be able to make really amazing stuff, or at least amazing documentaries and you know, theater, culture. Berlin is culture. People coming for arts and culture. Germany has historically been the country of arts and culture and philosophy, and it still is, you know, and I hope it stays that way, but it's been great to be able to work here, and I think it's amazing that there's so many international people working here too, that I can only hope that it continues, and that we get over this hump right now. Yeah, because for the listeners that don't know, I mean, the culture funding was slashed in Berlin through by a big percentage, and in general the culture in Germany and film is struggling a bit right now, but we're hoping to get out of it.
Yeah, we are hopeful.
Yeah.
And what have you been working lately? Like, what are we doing right now? Like,
I'm working on developing a few ideas, but they're not in production yet. So there's a documentary that I'm working on about a queer icon that is progressing, and another one that I'm trying not to be afraid of AI. I'm trying to integrate it into one of my projects now to bring back a cultural icon from the dead through AI, which I know is a little bit controversial, but hopefully it turns out well. So those are two projects that are kind of rolling right now, but hopefully they turn into something exciting.
so your AI usage is going to be only like imagery-wise, or also like in the construction of the script, or like how you just using the AI tool?
I'm gonna try to like bring someone who died too early back to life through AI.
All right. And yeah, that's an interesting topic to see how artists are going to use those tools.
Yeah, I mean, people are afraid of AI, and I think that maybe we should be. Like, you know, Yuval Noah Harari and other people are like, you know, talking about the scary part is when AI surpasses the human intelligence, which is, I guess, supposed to come in the next 3 to 5 years. But, you know, I read this book about the technology of care, and like, you know, you can't really reject technology because it's there. You know, you have to just learn to work with it and do so in a conscientious way. So, yeah, I thought, hey, this person that I want to make this film about is, you know, there's a documentary too that came out, like, I think it's called Eternal Life, about people that loved ones died and they are preserved through AI. So they like talk to their dead lovers, children, parents through this AI bot, and it's like subscription based. So you have to like keep paying to keep your like dead one alive. And it's a very interesting documentary. But so I was kind of like thinking like, oh, why not, instead of bringing the like saving loved one, bringing back this kind of like cultural icon to see how they would react to the world that we live in. And that's kind of the idea of this film. And yeah.
Nice. And it's a German production, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how's your experience with the German TV, like working process? Like how has it been developing? Like since, I mean, for the listeners that they do not know, you only shot like couple of TV shows, like Drag Me to USA and Choco, and yeah, can you tell me a little bit more like of the German TV structure and how did you fit in? And yeah, because Germany is the TV. There's a lot of finance coming from the state, and
no, there's like private and public TV, and I've worked for both. And both are great experiences. Like, I did my Queercore film and my William Burroughs film with like Arte. It was a really nice experience. And they dragged me to the USA. I took 3 German drag queens on a road trip from New Orleans to Los Angeles, and that was for RTL, which is like the biggest private network, so it's not state funded. And both experiences were great. I really enjoyed it. I could do that the rest of my life. It was really fun. So I would do it again in a heartbeat. And I think there's a lot of really great German networks that are, but it's not all consolidated in one place like Netflix or whatever. But there's a lot of like really nice stations. I love to watch Arte documentaries and stuff or ARD. I think it's really enjoyable now that I speak German. It's a very enjoyable experience. But no, I think working in the TV world here was a blessing, because in the States, it's only private. It's like PBS is like really struggling, and so there's not kind of like this. Like the reference of the middle class filmmaker is kind of really doesn't really exist in the States very much, because it's either you're really struggling or you're super famous, because there's not too many small in-betweens. Not so much of an underground. I think there used to be more of an indie scene, especially when there was like video stores, like old DVD and VHS, like the idea of the like videotheque, where you go and you talk to the guy, and there's this like obscure film, they even had, I remember Chicago where I grew up, there was like a local filmmaker section. Here too in Berlin, when I first moved here, there was all those video stores, and they had like the big local, like Berlin section was huge. And that's gone, and so it's good you have streamers like, and I mean, I'm not trying to plug Sooner, but it's good you have places like Sooner where you're like, can access local films, local work, and don't have to like go to a big conglomerate like streaming service, because that's what it's all about. And I think there's much more of it in Germany that's alive, and in Europe in general, than in the United States right now, unfortunately. But that's why it's great things like Sooner exist.
There's a controversial there, right? Like this welfare state being sometimes like something that kind of blocks creativity, because people doesn't have to struggle so much to produce their content, but at the same time they also free many creators to be able to do what they want and have access, and not having to shoot stuff super commercial, right? It's interesting. Me coming from Brazil, I see also this, like the middle class, how important it is for being an artist also.
Germany used to be, there's like all these initiatives like Kleines Fernsehspiel from ZDF, like Jim Jarmusch, like all of those kind of indie directors in the States made films here because they were like, they were giving them money to make their films. All these big American indie at the time, the 80s and 90s, were doing co-productions and making their films here because they had money. And even musicians like in Cologne and WDR was like, John Cage moved here because he got a weekly show at WDR and stuff like that. So this kind of like, I don't know, I wouldn't use the word welfare state, I would say more social, has been a great hub for creativity and for the whole world. So I hope now that things are getting reformed here that we're able to keep it up.
So, Yony, you also work for Vice, right?
I used to. They're dead. At least in Germany,
And what were you doing there? Like, if you look for some credits, we will find some stuff of you online?
I mean, I don't know what's left online at Vice. I started as a journalist and photojournalist for the magazine, like when I was 20, and then I did some interviews here, and I directed some. The last thing I did was when they were going out of business. I think it was the very last project that Vice Germany did was a branded like documentary series that they did with L'Oreal, and it was surreal that this kind of media conglomerate that defined my generation, and it wasn't a perfect place. Like they fucked up. There was a lot of problematic elements of Vice, but this like conglomerate that was valued at $9 billion in 2019, all of a sudden, a few years later, was just completely sent to the dust, was very surreal. But I hope, I was thinking, like, when it died, I was like, I didn't realize that it was dying, and like, what's going to fill the hole, especially I think what they did best in the last few years was the investigative journalists. It became known for the do's and don'ts and all of that shit, but the investigative journalism was really important, and I don't know who's going to replace that right now, because press is struggling. But yeah, Vice defined our generation, and I was happy to be part of it for a while. They did a lot of exploitative things, but they also did a lot of really good investigative journalism.
Yeah, this whole business model kind of went down, right? Those journalistic outlets that was like living from ads online, like this kind of everything fell apart. And it was like big groups, and suddenly everything was gone. And there's still some players there, but it's sad, right? Because we could finally see independent journalism going out and thrive. And yeah. So I want to talk about the Desire Set You Free. Mm-hmm. Your feature film. It was your first feature film here in Germany?
Fiction, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, for those who don't know, like Desire Set You Free is like a beautiful homage on Berlin queer and underground culture, where you kind of describe a little bit of the scene of Berlin, showing the classic characters and places for the Berlin underground movement. That's why Berlin is known for them. And you brought like many big names in the German subculture, like Nina Hagen, Rosa von Hohenheim, and many others. I would like to know how I mean, because I have the feeling that the film is like, it reflects a lot of your gaze on like discovering the city and the cultural life. And I'd like to know, how was it like the process of like coming to a script and creating, because you also plays in the film, you were one of the characters. So I would like to know, how was the process for you of like discovering the city and getting contact with the space and developing, producing like the whole process of the film?
Yeah, that was like our script was 7 pages long. It was very short, and it was mostly improvised. We knew what wanted to happen, but the dialogue was improvised, and we wanted to kind of showcase like Berlin and Berliners. So everyone known from the underground to the famous ones. And we shot in all real locations. We had like 30 locations, like all real bars and clubs and parks and cafes and places people would really hang out, because we understood the gentrification had kind of started, and we wanted to make like an archive a little bit of the city. So it was very improvised, and we decided that I would act in it so I could kind of control the improvisations a little bit. And it was super fun. I was just thinking the other day of one of the scenes we shot with, there was this internet artist that I knew through Vice called Labana Babylon, and she did this like crazy glitter LSD connection ceremony in Golitzer Park, and there were like 2 guys from Russia sitting on the bench, and she like they like covered them naked queer people covered in glitter, going and giving these Russian guys hugs. And I think the guys were on drugs too. They were totally like, their eyes would just come from Berghain, like their eyes were like huge, and they were just like, what the heck is happening here? And we filmed with like a long lens camera, so the cameras were kind of far back and you couldn't really, and it was a super fun process doing that film. And we did it with like very little budget. We just got like a little tiny bit of money from one of the film funds. And then Kleines Fernsehspiel got involved afterwards to help us finish the film. But it was one of those projects that you have to do when you're like young, but it was super exciting. And then people were just like hearing about our film and like wanting to join in last minute. And like Blood Orange was in town and was like, oh yeah, I want to be in a scene, and came and was in a scene. And yeah, Nina Hagen had lines and didn't remember them and just was like talking about God for 2 hours, and somehow we cut it together to make it make sense a little bit. Blixa Bargeld came and did a cameo, and we shot in all of these clubs, gave us like permission to shoot there for free, and it was a really fun process. And it was produced by my then friend at the time, Paula Alamillo, who's now quite still does some interesting stuff. And it was a crazy experience, and it was very punk, and it was very DIY, and it was very much about testing and playing around and having fun. And it wasn't confined, it wasn't strict. So many of like the German films and European films in general, I think, are so controlled. They're like ballets, and I like a lot of that. I can really enjoy those some of those films, but we wanted to go the completely other direction and just see what we could get from being wild. And I would have, if I could go back, I would have done it all that. I would have cut out all the scripted elements and cut out all the dialogue that we had written and stuff, and just gone even further. But it was really fun. It was an amazingly fun experience, and yeah.
And is it each individual film for you a different process, or you have kind of a blueprint how you usually like address like film process?
Documentary wise, it's maybe more of a process, but no, I try to approach things with a new lens, everything with kind of a new set of I mean, relatively new set of rules, and try to be innovative, and
yeah, I can see on the Desire Set You Free that you can see like clearly that there's many like super documentary parts within the film. And also like me, also a foreigner coming from Berlin, also see the classic characters of Berlin. I rewatched it for the podcast, and I had a bunch of laughs like seeing those characters, and I'm wondering if in 10 years they'll still be there, gonna be there or not. Like the one particular that made me really happy is this Turkish sir that's always riding his bike and horning with his buzzer.
I just saw him yesterday here right in front, and it was like, oh, he's still doing his thing. He's fighting for rights for immigrants to vote, because he was born in Germany, but he's not a German citizen because his parents are Turkish, and he's like fighting for the right of citizenship and the right to vote, which is super important and great. And he still just rides his bike the whole day with a sign and whistle.
Yeah, a shout out to him, because every time I see him, I get goosebumps. Just see him and how he's like a super role model, like for political action. Like I'm quite shocked that he's still doing that.
Yeah, me too.
So in the Desire Set You Free, how was the Berliner clubs are classic for like having door policies and not letting many of like tourist people coming in, and like kind of being protected and kind of protect the scene, like the origin scene where everything came from. And how was the approach with them? Like, because I saw you shooting the classic like Roses and all like those places, and how were they open for the project? Like, how was this?
They knew me, and they are like the people shooting the film were not like professional film people. We were all like in the underground. We were like there every week at the club, so they knew us and they knew me. And we described the film. Hey, we want to like kind of like document this before it disappears. And by the way, everybody's in it. And then they were like, sure. Everyone that was the first time I think a lot of those places let anyone shoot film in their play. And I mean, About Blank, Roses, all those places, like that was like the first time they let people shoot there. And it was great. It was fun.
Yeah, that was my first thought when I saw the pinky walls from Rosa's bar. I was like, oh my God, they really shot there.
Yeah.
And by the first time I saw the film, I think Rosa was not still iconic imagery in my imagination, but after the second time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, they did that.
Yeah, that bar is still crazy. I just went back there for the first time in years, and it hadn't changed very much. It's great.
I would like also to talk now about your punk roots and your punk influences, and because I mean, I've even though you approach in some of your films like this thematics. So, and you also like, I've seen elements of your aesthetics in many of your films of those kind of do-it-yourself and like making with almost nothing and making stuff happen. And I see still like on your TV shows, like it's kind of a fingerprint of your work. Like, could you describe me a little bit like how is your relationship with the movement and also like this, like in film, like it's harder, like punk in films is like something that punk is like, it's always intertwined with the industry and with more production, and how you kind of confront those two genders, let's call it genders now, but like those two aesthetics. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, punk will never die. You know, like it's funny, so many subcultures come and go, but punk is basically, for me, it's a mentality. It's like a saying fuck you to the status quo and doing things yourself. And I think the rebelliousness of the punk mentality is still such an useful and fun way to make art. You know, I never saw punk. I was like hanging out with punks when I was younger and stuff like that. I didn't play in a band, but I loved a lot of the punk filmmakers, like the Cinema of Transgression Richard Kern and Lydia Lunch and all of them. And the idea of just like going out with a Super 8 camera and making crazy with your friends and making crazy weird projects. And I always wanted to use that in my work. Because I think the raw way of showing something is super interesting, especially within a documentary, rather than the really controlled method. And I think the controlled method is so used, especially in European filmmaking, that it's the director takes themselves as this all-knowing conductor, trying to control every little note. And I do think those films are interesting, but I think there's so much room for the wild and unexpected elements that come when you're just being free and having fun, to be honest. So that's why I love the punk way of working, and I still do. And I did some really clean, like that TV show is really clean. I can do some really clean and pretty work, but there's still this kind of like pushing, this kind of like leaving room for the unexpected and leaving room for the wild and unknown, and not trying to plan and control every little element.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot on like the Brazilian New Wave films, like where it was like one of the, like there is a Hunger Statics from Glauber Rocha. He wrote a book about it, and he always tells about this possibility of creating a space where the new can actually just pop, and this is actually what's the magical about filmmaking, is like actually letting these moments happening. And yeah. I think it's really nice to see that this in your work, but like with the punk aesthetics together, and also super nice. So I'm wondering, like, how you divided, like, your, like, I don't know, here in Germany people talk a lot about like the jobs and the passion projects. Like there is this division on many artists and filmmakers that I know around the city. And I would like to know, like, how you divide on those two roles. Like how is your ratio, and how do you trans into like projects that will pay the bills and the other ones that are like the passion projects?
I don't separate it. I'm like one of the few people, I don't separate it. My work is my work. If I do something, I put it in 100%, and I try to have fun with it. So I don't really have like passion projects and then like money projects. I think all my projects are my projects, and I stopped thinking about my projects so much as like my babies or my like these are my my creations. I think of them more days now as collaborations. So if it's an Auftrag, if it's a commissioned work, or if it's something that I'm developing, I still see it these days as more collaboration. You're collaborating with the producers, with writers, with commissioning editors, and you're trying to make the kind of most interesting project through this collaboration. But this like idea of this all-controlling director is something that I don't really like see or believe in anymore. But yeah, I don't really view things like that. I don't think I don't know, for me it's not a fun way to work, to like, because I have projects that I really want to make and that I develop, and they're my ideas, and then I have other things that I'm hired to do. So hopefully, we're always trying to get more, and I enjoy the process of both. Yeah. And
like if there is any like younger filmmakers, like Europeans and Americans, doesn't matter, and they're struggling for like making his first films or like making his first steps, like like think about the circumstances of how like video creation is taking place on this like post-internet, post-YouTube world, like post-TikTok. Yeah. How would you envision like a beginning of a career right now?
I just like would tell them also to like experience life. I think so many people want to make art but haven't really experienced things. I think like number one step, experience life, like enjoy, see new things, try things, examine, watch, absorb as much as you can from the world and take part, and then take inspiration from your life and try to make like a meaningful impact. The actual act of making a film has gotten cheaper and cheaper and easier, So just I would say like before you jump in and say I want to make a film, to like make sure it's meaningful and make sure you've thought it out and make sure you've had some life experiences, and then go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way of wrapping up.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Rodrigo.
And that's a wrap. Yony Leyser Desire Set You Free is available to stream on Sooner, along with a variety of curated films that we've carefully chosen for you. You can access Sooner on the phone with Android and iOS, on your smart TV, Apple TV, in your web browser, and as a channel on Amazon Prime. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast and recommend it. Do you love Sooner? Tell your friends. See you next time.